Hi, it's Tony from Alika Analytics, and this is Screencast 3, and this is the second part in exploring a web developer's toolbox. On our website, there's an article that goes along with this screencast. And on that article, you'll find the link to the first screencast in the series, and that was basically about installing and using a toolkit that's sort of like I'd call the quick tool set for a web developer. And a browser, an editor, and pre-post, a thing for running a web server and pre-processing some of your files. However, this screencast, we're going to cover more of the professional version of the tool set. It's built on top of an ecosystem called the Node Package Manager, Npm. And that's Npm is basically a big ecosystem of modules that developers have shared over the internet. Web developers use it a lot, and JavaScript developers use it a lot. So in order to follow around along with the rest of this tutorial, you're going to want to install npm. And installing npm, you'll go to this Node website, Node.js website. You'll install Node.js for your platform. And Node.js is a platform for running JavaScript applications, and bundled with Node.js is the package manager npm. And once you have that installed, you'll be ready to do the rest of the tutorial. So at this point, we'll assume that you've installed npm. We're also going to assume you have a Chrome web browser on your machine and that you've installed Atom as a text editor. That's the text editor I'm going to use for the rest of the tutorial. And basically what we're going to do in this screencast now is do exactly the same workflow we did in the first screencast. We're going to develop a website, debug it, and the difference is going to be that we're going to use the npm ecosystem. We're not going to use the pre-post GUI tools, and it's going to be a lot more command line oriented. So now that we have the tools installed, let's do a short orientation on npm. You start up your shell. If you're on the Mac, you start the terminal, and if you're on Windows, you'd start the command line prompt. Now we type npm --version, and npm is in my path on the command line, and it tells me the version. So that's super. Now some of the basic things we can do with npm is we can search for modules. So let's say, for instance, we'll search for jQuery. And npm basically has a large library of modules that have been shared by other developers on the web. And that's one of the reasons you want to use npm, because all these developers, such as the team who did jQuery, they built their module and then they published it to the npm library, and you can find it here and use it. You could do something like npm install jQuery, and that would add a dependency to your project on jQuery, and you could start using it. Now, in addition to doing search, you can do docs jQuery. And there you go. That brings up the website for jQuery, the documentation website. Let's just toss that away. Bang, bang, bang. Seems true of all the other modules. You can type npm repo, and that will show you the code for it if it's an open source project. And so there's the software for jQuery and a little bit of documentation. And the cool thing about that is since it's an open source project, you can look at these modules, see how they did it, and you can learn things about what you should do in your own projects possibly. Okay, so that's the basic introduction to npm. Now I'm going to assume that you also have a text editor like Atom installed on your machine, and you have a web browser like Chrome on there, so you can finish the rest of the tutorial. One important thing I should mention about npm is once you have some sort of project that's using npm, let's say for instance I have a folder here called web app, and it has a bunch of files in it, and one of the files is called package.json. If I just show you what's in package.json very quickly, it actually lists a bunch of dependencies on files. Okay, and there's a directory that contains all the modules that my project are dependent on. I'm going to remove that just temporarily. And the first thing you should always do, there we go. The first thing you should do when you come into a directory that's dependent on npm is type npm install. It'll read the package.json file, and then what it'll do is recreate this node modules directory and fill it with all of the software modules from the npm repository that you're going to need for this project. Okay, it's just about done. If you don't do that, you'll get some weird results. You'll go to start your web server and stuff like that, and it might tell you that things are just missing. So let's look. And there we go. We have a nodes modules directory, and the nodes modules directory has now lots of modules in it. It has all the software that's going to be needed in this project. Now, if you remember the first screencast where we were using these point-and-click tools like Prepost and to build our website, first thing we did is we made a directory structure, and we started putting files in it. That's called scaffolding. And what we're going to do is I'm going to create a directory as well, and we'll call it web app. Okay, but I'm not going to fill it in myself, because you can imagine if it were a complicated project, there's actually quite a bit to kickstarting a project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use another tool, an Npm tool, to kickstart this project. So first I'll cd into the directory. There, I'm in the directory now. And now I'm going to install an Npm tool called Yeoman. So I do Npm Install -g and yo. Okay. And you could read more about Yeoman by typing in npm search yo, npm docs yo, npm repo yo, all those types of things. But it's basically, it has a big library of generator tools that you can use to kickstart different projects. And I added one to that library because what I wanted to do was create an extremely simple project for you. So in my case, the generator I'm going to call install. Globally as well, I called it generator Alika because I'm going to use it to help with tutorials. So I'm installing that guy, my Alika generator, and there it is. And now I type yo Alika, and what it's going to do is it's going to start populating this thing with a basic setup for a project. And see, it's filling it up if you look there on the right hand side. And just about done. Okay, and if you look at the directory just appeared called nodes_modules, actually that contains a whole bunch of npm modules that are going to be used to launch a web server and pre-process files. Okay, normally you don't need to look in that, but there's a lot there. Okay, so a lot of modules there. Open up and bang. So here we have it. There's a few things in here. Our web app is basically here. You probably recognize the structure. It's got one HTML file in it. It's got a style sheet using SCSS. Not just an old-fashioned style sheet, but a style sheet that will need some pre-processing before the index.html can use it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use a tool called Gulp, and you should have installed it. You would have installed, done npm install, and then -g, and then you would have typed in gulp CLI, and you should have that in your path already. I won't do that right now because I already have it installed, and I can verify that I have it installed by typing gulp version. Oh, gulp version, not glop, gulp version. There, great. So I have my project there, and I can type gulp serve, and what that's going to do is launch the web server, pre-process any style sheets I have, and bring up the website. And presto, there's my website. And we'll explore that a little bit now. So my job here is to convince you that we have a development environment very much like the quick tool set that we have. Of course, it has a lot more flexibility now because we can use any of the modules that are available on the web that have been put into NPM. So let's actually see that this is the case. What I'm going to do is minimize that, start up Atom. Okay, that's my web browser. I mean my my editor. Actually, let's go over here and drag my new project into Atom so we can start looking at the files. Go back here again to, so we have a split screen. I have all the files for the project, and I have a web browser showing it, and it's serving it live. And actually, if I show you this, let's see if I can show you this. Take this guy in the background, make him big, so you can see that this guy is actually busy watching. He's watching right now for changes in the file system. So I'm going to put this guy back up here, this guy up here, and I'm going to make a change. Yep, and presto, just like in screencast 1, the files are being updated automatically. So I'll change the style sheet now. You notice it's already compiled it. It compiled it when I made the server before it was empty, but then we'll start putting some things here. We'll put in pink, for instance, for the background. Bang, and it's working. So I basically have a development environment just like the pre-post one that I showed you in screencast 1. I did it using npm tools, and the reason this is kind of superior to the pre-post one is if you're going to build a big website and you're going to be dependent on lots of other pieces of software, you have the flexibility to add the modules yourself and control what versions and things like that. Pre-post is nice if you just want to do something quickly, but if you want to build something reproducible, built on top of lots of modules, not ideal. Okay, so that's basically it. And I hope that was a good start for you. You want to learn more about npm and other tools, I think I've shown you enough to get you started. And thanks a lot. So that wraps it up. Remember, on our website there's a blog article that goes with this, and I'm going to add a link to this screencast there so you can read about the tools and get the links to the tools and look at the screencast. So thanks very much, and hope you join us for the next screencast.